Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 106. I'm here with my couch cats. There's one butt. The other butt's over there. I'm going to touch it off screen. Yeah. And my desk cat, my rainbow cup holder. Even though I don't really need a cup holder, I still like it. It was a gift from a friend, my dear friends. And let's get it started. I received a message from a friend today. This is a real message, not a fake message. I just took this screenshot. And so let's go make sure I can see in this window exactly the same thing you see. Roll it up there. Yep. So this is a little mountain graph here. We can see it says like 3 months right there. Almost back to square one, lol. And the lol means, God damn it, because everybody knows you just want these numbers to go up. And, you know, I saw this and I was like, yeah, it's been kind of crappy recently in the stock market. All this turbulence, all this volatility. And in fact, if we go to a different graph of the S&P 500 and a 3-month view, we can see kind of a similar trend. We got a little humpy hump there. But overall, it's down, you know. Back in late January, we were at kind of a nice high point, and then it's just kind of like a downward trend now. It's like we're going downhill, and at the bottom of the hill is a giant pit of crap, and we're just going to land on our faces in it. Woo, it's going to be fun. People are nervous. And it's understandable. It's not fun to watch the market go down. Thinking about this overall, though, is a problem of perspective. When we look at this graph, we're looking at a tiny, tiny period in the history of our lives and in the history of the stock market. Here is the performance of the S&P 500 since 1990. And it is true for sure that there are periods of decline that can last 2-3 years. That's about a 3-year period, and here we're looking at 1 year, maybe 2-year period, I guess, would be like that. And then this amazing run that we are currently kind of coming down from a high. Don't know what's going to happen because maybe we're here and we're about to rocket up again, or maybe we're here and we're about to rocket down again. We don't know. Most of the time, though, this is going up. So if we're just basing it on time, if you have to roll the dice and put your money into the market or not, you're better off putting your money into the market because most of the time it is going to increase. And that's why it increases overall. This behavior means that when we consider what the appropriate use of the stock market is in our lives, it is for long-term investing, not short-term investing. 1 to 2 years is not enough time to have a very solid idea that you are going to reach the final number that you need to execute your plan. So for example, if you are saving for a home, do not save that money in 100% S&P 500 because when the market tanks and the homes get really cheap, your home buying fund also got really cheap, which means that when you sell it, you're not going to buy as much home as if you had saved that in something like cash or bonds. Man, I hear a creak on my left, and I think it's a cat jumping into the kitchen. All right. When these downturns happen that last 2 or 3 years, we still want to be able to eat and have housing. We also want to avoid selling stock because we're going to be selling stock at kind of a low price compared to the historical average, and we want to buy low and sell high, not buy high and sell low. And we want to purchase more stock if possible because when we're kind of going into a dip, we don't know where the bottom is going to be. We just know that it's getting cheaper and cheaper. So if we can find a job or we can find some incoming source of cash that we can use to buy these discounted stocks, it's a good idea, especially if the Shiller PE ratio is at historical lows, which it definitely isn't right now. But if it did get near, say, even 20, or certainly if it got near 15, buy. That is a good value. So we can accomplish these 3 goals by having bonds or cash or some kind of emergency fund that's not going to drop as quickly as the stock market, so that we have money to pay for housing and pay for food during the dip. Another option is you could have a rental home, for example, and the cash from the rental home, even though rents might go down a little bit, is still going to be cash that you can spend on food in your own housing. And if you have enough of that rental income, then a market dip is going to, it's going to hurt a little bit, but you're still going to have the cash that you need to sustain your lifestyle. And finally, especially if you want to purchase more stock, if you have some kind of part-time or full-time work that you wouldn't mind going back to, that would be excellent, either to supplement your lifestyle so you don't have to sell stocks or to purchase new stocks. It's important to remember when we buy stock that we are not buying money. We're buying ownership of a business, and it's an expected thing that businesses have up cycles and down cycles, and we need to purchase that asset with the understanding that we need a game plan to handle the down cycle. It would be great if we could predict the down cycles, but it's super difficult, and I'm going to discuss a perspective that I read in the Simple Path to Wealth book that I read recently, and I liked it, so I'm going to repeat it here. We're going to ignore black swan events. Those are big historical events that, when we look at a dry analysis of a market with a certain volatility, a certain variability, and a certain kind of long-term gain, we're still not going to be able to predict these. For example, the dot-com bubble, development of the internet, 9/11, 2008 housing crash. These are specific historical, even cultural things. The dot-com bubble happened around the new millennium. You think that had nothing to do with people getting really excited? I don't. I think it had a little something to do with it. So we're going to set that stuff aside. But I think it's an interesting idea. So let's read the definition of a black swan event. The black swan theory, or theory of black swan events, is a metaphor that describes an event that comes as a surprise, has a major effect, and is often inappropriately rationalized after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. In other words, after the thing happens, people say, oh, we should have seen that coming because of X, Y, Z, but the truth is there was no way you would have ever seen that coming. There's just too many possible futures at any given time. Okay, so now we're going to talk about why it is difficult to predict these downturns. Or, for that matter, why it's difficult to predict the performance of an individual stock. When we talk about index funds, we're talking about an index of stocks. And specifically, these individual stocks represent ownership in a public company of some kind in the United States. Public companies have detailed accounting and reporting requirements. These are very specific requirements. For example, within a given industry, when ExxonMobil has to report its energy reserves, there are specific rules even about what type of oil can be counted as a certain type of reserve. So the U.S. government has become very specific in terms of telling these companies what they can and cannot report. Mostly what they can and are required to report. And not to say that they're perfect, right? Like Exxon misrepresented its oil reserves for a long time until finally it was forced to, I think it was tar sands specifically, that tar sands are like more difficult to get to than other types of oil and require more processing. And Exxon was reporting them as if they were like Saudi Arabia spouting oil in the ground for quite a while, which of course would increase its stock price until you realize that they actually don't have the assets that they say they do to develop. Stock prices are based on anticipated future cash flows. For example, if you believe a company won't make much money in the future, then you believe that it probably won't be able to pay a very good dividend in the future, and so you don't want to pay a lot for that company because it's not going to have a lot of money to adjust when market conditions change. It's not going to have that much money to pay a dividend. It's just not making that much money. But if you believe that there's a company where the world will just shower it with money, like Apple Computer or Nvidia or these tech companies that get people really excited about machine learning or whatever it is, then you would be willing to pay more for the stock because you believe that in the future there's going to be a ton of money coming into that company, and that money is either going to be turned into dividends or it's going to be turned into stuff, capital, book value, buildings, machines, building engineering teams, accumulated expertise. And therefore, because stock prices are based on anticipated future cash flows, earnings and earnings forecasts are a big part of what analysts look at when they are deciding whether a stock is fairly priced, whether a stock should be priced higher, and so it's a good opportunity to buy, or whether it should be whether it should be priced lower, so you should probably sell it if you own it. Earnings forecasts for large companies are created in a process that goes something like this. Low-level employees who actually sell stuff have to take a guess at how much they think they're going to sell that year. So like the people in Arkansas have to guess what the Arkansas market is going to buy. The people in Georgia have to guess what the Georgia market's going to buy. So they have to predict what they're going to sell. And they do it based on seasonal stuff. They do it based on past sales. If there are new products coming out, they have to take that into account. And they do it based on like how much they believe they can sell. Obviously a salesperson doesn't want to forecast some crazy unrealistic number because then when they don't hit that forecast, their ass is fired, and that's no fun. Then they hand these estimates or predictions up to their bosses. And these predictions are based on all kinds of details that are impossible to predict. The bosses then look at them, and the bosses have a different perspective. Or the boss has an MBA, or the boss has pressure to sell more or give a higher forecast because the boss has pressure to keep that stock price up. And so the boss is going to say, yes, yes, no, 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 yes, no, 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 change this entirely. And then they hand it back down, and the underlings are then required to come up with some new bullshit reason why the forecast changed in whatever direction the boss wanted it to change in. Then they hand a new forecast back up, and included is going to be, I guess, the budgets for the coming year, what they think everything is going to cost. And obviously that changes quite a bit. If you look at the high-speed rail that California is trying to build, I think it's like it started at $1 billion and now it's up to $6 billion, or just, the cost estimates on this thing have just changed dramatically in the course of 10 years. So yeah, they hand the numbers down, they hand the numbers up, they hand the numbers back down. There's political stuff going on. There's self-interest stuff going on. There's just making stuff up stuff going on. And finally, it comes time to report this information, and they take what they have and they include it in their public report. Are the forecasts accurate? Maybe, maybe not. But these reports are what investors and analysts have when they're trying to value the company, when they're trying to determine if the stock price is fair or what direction the stock price is going to move in. And it's not surprising then that stock analysts regularly demonstrate that they're unable to accurately forecast stock prices. After all, if they could, they would become fabulously wealthy. I think there's an article on this somewhere, but if you just invested in the single stock in the S&P 500 that did the best during any given calendar year, and that was your portfolio every year, you would get super, super, super duper wealthy. That would be freaking amazing for you. No one's done it before. At least not for any sustained period of time. Even Warren Buffett. No one's done it before because you get wealthy so incredibly fast by doing it. We have to deal with the world as it is, not as we would like it to be. And what that means is that in the case of the stock market, we need flexibility when it comes to the timing of selling our investments because we cannot predict the directions of these stock prices in the short term, and we're unable to time the market. We don't have enough information, and crazy crap like 9/11 and the tech bubble and the housing crash happen, which we also are unable to predict. To get the flexibility that we need to sell our investments when we know that we are getting the normal historical gain, so it's not a bad time to sell them, I forgot that last sentence. Anyway, to get the flexibility, same thing I always say, reduce your fixed costs, pay off your debt. If you have low fixed costs, then you only need to sell a tiny little bit of investment, if that's all you got, when the market is down. You want to build a healthy emergency fund. That healthy emergency fund gives you a cushion so that you can live off of the emergency fund when that emergency market drop happens, and you will not have to sell those investments when they are down. And finally, if you understanding that active work, like going back to work, provides a cash flow that you can use to avoid selling the investments or buy discounted investments that will give you even more money in the future because now you're paying less for the same amount of cash flow in the future over the course of, say, 10 years. That's what I mean when I'm talking about cash flow. I'm talking about long-term cash flow. That is a great deal. So when you earn that money when the market down, you're not just earning the money that you're earning. You're also earning the money that's going to come from those discounted investments that you're able to buy. Anticipating that this is the situation, we want to build skills over time that have value in the marketplace even when the economy isn't doing well. For example, if all you know is construction, you're not in a good position to take advantage of a down market because new construction tends to tank when the market drops because there's less money in people's portfolios there's less value of the stocks in people's portfolios to sell and buy a property. And also people are under financial distress when the market is down. So they're selling their properties, their existing properties, which causes the price of the properties to drop because they have debts or they need to pay for something else. So if all you have is construction skills, you need to think about diversifying that skill set outside of just that narrow area. And that is why Lewis recommends making it a hobby to just always be learning something. Could be just one thing, just one class, one night a week, online, in person, I don't care. Maybe you're just reading a book. Over time, and when I say over time, I don't mean like over 5 days, I mean over 5 years, over 10 years, you are going to pick up additional skill sets. You are going to pick up additional knowledge, and the additional knowledge that you pick up is going to inform the next directions that you want to take your life in and that can give you money. I'll give you a good example. When I was working at a startup in Palo Alto, and I was not in engineering yet. I was in like these auxiliary engineering functions that were things that I had taught myself, but since I didn't have a CS degree, I wasn't allowed to work on like an app yet. And one thing I did is because I was in Palo Alto, I was like, Stanford has continuing education courses. I'll take a class in iPhone development. So I took a class in iPhone development, didn't do any homework. I just sat in the class and I listened to the guy explain how to build phone apps. And after the class, I did not know how to build a phone app because to learn that kind of thing, you need to actually do it. And I was doing too much at that point. I was working and I had other stuff going on. But I took the class and it gave me an outline of kind of how is this thing done, broadly speaking. But it also gave me something important, which is how hard is this topic? How long is it going to take to learn the different pieces of it? And what are the different pieces of this topic to learn? Within a year, I had switched jobs to a new company in an actual development engineering role. And guess what? My boss was like, hey, we need to develop an iPhone app. And I was like, great. I've already taken a class on it, and I already know what I need to learn in order to do this job. And so over the course of that 6 months, I taught myself phone development by reading the boring documentation and going into work at like 6 a.m. and drinking lots of coffee. And at the end of the 6 months, I knew how to build mobile applications, at least on the iOS, on Apple's platform. And that's like a very specific, concrete example of how my choice to take a class in something that I simply knew was popular and interesting, not that I knew a year from then I was going to be doing full-time, helped me and helped move me forward. When I went from that non-specific kind of general job-ish to the engineering job, my salary increased by like 35%. It was a great deal. And so always be learning. Things that I learned from a tax course, just a personal, like how to save on taxes if you're a person at Stanford, has also helped me over time to make sure that I am using all the tax advantage vehicles that I can to stop this horrible bleeding outflow of my money to the federal and state government. All right. When the market turns down, some of these skills that you teach yourself, you are simply going to be able to say, yes, I already know that. But there's a second thing that you get from making learning a hobby. And what that is that you have the confidence that you can teach yourself something new. Because you know over the course of the last 5 years, you've taught yourself 10 new things. So if you already know, like in computers, for example, because that's what I'm in, that you've taught yourself 2 different additional programming languages over the course of the past 5 years, when you go into a new job and they say, yeah, we're using Gibble-Flarbablarb language, do you think you can teach yourself that? You're going to be like, yep, because I already taught myself these 2, and that's just another one of those. And I definitely 100%, 100,000% have found over time that the more things that you learn, the more similar the next thing is. And I have 100% found that a lot of times when I see a new subject now, all it is some old subject that I've already learned. Like 80% of it is a structure or a paradigm or something that I already know, just with some little extra frosting on top. And I think people who know languages also, if you're a big language geek, you'll know that like Romance languages have a lot of commonalities. And so once you teach yourself a couple of those Romance languages, third Romance language is starting to make a lot of sense. Same concepts. Perspective. On a daily basis, it's going to be hard to keep a proper perspective. Trump's going to talk about a trade war. People are going to talk about China dumping U.S. treasuries as a financial attack. Zuckerberg is going to sit in front of Congress, and they're going to talk about regulation. Facebook stock's going to go down, and it's going to go back up, and then maybe it's going to go down again. And this drama is going to be in your life until the day you die because the media makes money off of it. And you're going to feel anxiety from this stuff. Even if you don't have any investments, you're just going to feel anxiety because you're worried that the employment market's going to tank and you're going to get laid off. When you have these anxieties and when you have these feelings, go back and look at that 50-year chart of the S&P 500. Go back and listen to this video and revisit the concepts that I've talked about tonight. Because if you are teaching yourself something new always, after 5 or 10 years, you're going to have a very flexible, very nimble mind that when bad things happen, you will know that you can adjust and take advantage of them rather than suffer from them. I think this is a great quote. It's from Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, Book 7, Section 6, I guess. It didn't say that was a chapter or a section. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. In other words, some bullshit's going to go down, and we're going to be able to figure it out. But it's going to be a lot easier if we set ourselves up to figure it out now. So keep those fixed costs low, save some money, keep a long-term historical perspective, always be learning something. Even if it's just the fact that always be learning is perhaps not the best English in the world. All right, that's it for 5-Year Club video number 106. I hope you enjoyed it. And prepare yourself to be a person who will figure the shit out when it hits the fan. Have a fabulous evening.